Dr. Elena Vasquez knelt in the crimson dust of Kepler 442c, her gloved hands carefully extracting a core sample from what had once been the planet's ocean floor. Around her, the skeletal remains of ancient coral reefs jutted from the barren landscape like the bones of forgotten giants. The atmospheric processors hummed in the distance, their massive turbines working tirelessly to transform the toxic air into something breathable. "Another day in paradise," muttered Commander James Park through the comm system, his voice crackling with static from the dust storms that perpetually ravaged the planet's surface. Elena smiled grimly. It had been 18 months since the Terran Collective had dumped 12,000 political dissidents, scientists, and undesirables on this dead rock, expecting them to perish within weeks. The planet had no atmosphere worth breathing, no liquid water, and surface temperatures that fluctuated between freezing and scorching, depending on which side faced the binary stars. The exile had been meant as a death sentence disguised as mercy. "Elena, you need to see this," called Dr. Yano K4 from across the excavation site. The geologist was practically vibrating with excitement as he held up his tablet, displaying spectrographic analysis results. She made her way over, careful not to disturb the archaeological grid they had established. Over the past year, their small scientific team had discovered that Kepler 442c hadn't always been dead. Billions of years ago, it had harbored a complex ecosystem, one that had been deliberately destroyed. "The mineral composition in this layer," OK4 explained, pointing to a dark stratum in the rock face. "It's not natural. This planet was strip-mined. Every trace of organic matter was extracted and removed." Elena examined the data, her mind racing. By who? "There's no evidence of indigenous intelligent life." "That's just it," OK4 said, his eyes gleaming. "The isotope signatures match Terran Collective mining techniques. They've been here before, Elena. Centuries ago." The implications hit her like a physical blow. The Collective hadn't randomly chosen this planet for their exile. They had deliberately sent them to a world they had already pillaged and abandoned. But what they hadn't anticipated was human ingenuity born from desperation. 3 kilometers away, in the growing settlement of New Horizon, engineer Maria Santos was solving yet another impossible problem. The fusion reactors they had cobbled together from their transport ship's engines were failing, and the hydroponic farms that fed their 12,000 survivors needed constant power. "We need to go deeper," she announced to her team of volunteers, all former prisoners like herself. "The planet's core is still active. We tap into the geothermal energy directly." Her lieutenant, a former Collective naval officer named Chen Wei, shook his head. "Maria, that's insane. We don't have the equipment for deep core drilling. We'd need industrial-grade boring machines, not the improvised tools we've built." Santos grinned, the expression transforming her weathered face. "Who says we need to drill?" Elena's team found massive cave systems that run all the way down to the thermal layer. "We just need to figure out how to harness it." Within 6 months, New Horizon had transformed from a cluster of survival shelters into a bustling underground city. The humans had discovered that the planet's honeycomb of caves, originally formed by the ancient mining operations, provided perfect insulation and protection from the surface storms. More importantly, the caves connected to vast geothermal networks that provided unlimited clean energy. Dr. Vasquez stood in the newly constructed biolab, watching as the first generation of genetically modified organisms took root in the artificial soil they had created. Using DNA samples recovered from the planet's fossilized remains, her team had reconstructed simplified versions of the original ecosystem. "The atmospheric processes are working faster than projected," reported her assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim. "Oxygen levels are increasing by 0.3% per month. At this rate, we'll have breathable atmosphere in surface zones within 5 years." Elena nodded, but her attention was focused on the thriving bacterial colonies growing in the nutrient baths before her. Each strain had been carefully engineered to break down the planet's toxic compounds, while producing oxygen and organic matter. They were literally rebuilding the planet's biosphere from the ground up. "Doctor?" interrupted a voice from the communications console. It was Commander Park, calling from the orbital monitoring station they had constructed using salvage materials from their original transport ships. "What is it, James?" "We've got company. 3 collective reconnaissance vessels just dropped out of FTL at the system's edge. They're broadcasting surrender demands and preparing to land occupation forces." Elena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The collective had expected them to die quietly, not to thrive. A thriving human colony on a planet they had claimed was uninhabitable would raise uncomfortable questions about their past activities. "How long do we have?" 18 hours, maybe less. Elena looked around at the bustling laboratory, at the dozens of researchers and engineers who had transformed themselves from prisoners into pioneers. In the distance, she could see the vertical farms that now fed thousands, the manufacturing plants that produced everything from electronics to medicine, and the schools where children born on this supposedly dead world were learning to call it home. "Sarah, upload all our research to the quantum communicators. Broadcast everything, the archaeological evidence, the genetic reconstructions, the proof of collective mining operations. Scatter it across every free network in the galaxy." As the young scientist rushed to comply, Elena made her way to the surface through the transport tubes that now connected the underground city to the monitoring stations above. For the first time in months, she stepped out onto the planet's surface without an environmental suit. The air was thin but breathable. Green patches of reconstructed vegetation dotted the red landscape, fed by the growing network of underground springs they had created. In the distance, atmospheric processors continued their work, but now they were assisted by billions of engineered organisms that called this world home. When the collective ships landed, they found not the corpses they expected, but a delegation of 12,000 humans who had transformed exile into triumph. The dead planet that was supposed to have been their grave had become their greatest achievement, a testament to the resilience of human creativity when faced with impossible odds. Commander Park stood at Elena's side as the collective representatives emerged from their landing craft, their faces hidden behind environmental masks, in the very air that thousands of humans now breathed freely. "Welcome to Kepler 442c, Elena called out, her voice carrying clearly in the thin but life-sustaining atmosphere. Or as we call it now, hope. The planet that was meant to be humanity's graveyard had become the birthplace of their greatest colony, and the evidence of collective crimes that would ultimately lead to the liberation of dozens of other worlds they had similarly strip-mined and abandoned it. Sometimes, Elena reflected, the best way to defeat your enemies is to succeed so spectacularly that their lies become impossible to maintain.